hope you hear her cries as you try to sleep at night. I hope you see the tears run down her face when she asked you to go home. I hope you spend the rest of your life in fear of death. You will never hurt another child again. Judge Howard, speaking for myself, for my community, and the nation, I plead with you to accept the recommendation of the jury for death as presented to you by the jury 10-2.
And for the murder of Jessica Marie Lunsford, this court sentences you, John Evander Cooey, to death.
The state of Florida never got the chance to execute Cooey. He died Wednesday of natural causes at a hospital. A Department of Corrections spokeswoman says Cooey had been ill for some time. The 51-year-old was sentenced to death in 2007 for kidnapping 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford from her bedroom in 2005 and raping and murdering her.
On a February night in 2005 in Florida, an unlocked door paved the way for a monster to snatch 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford right from her own bed. Her mysterious disappearance sparked a turbulent investigation, exposing police missteps and a suffocatingly cruel crime committed by a neighbor. Yet rising above the depths of this tragedy and a father's desperate tears, a powerful legacy was born. This is the journey of turning unimaginable pain into a legal shield that now protects millions of children across America. In the sleepy, laid-back town of Homosassa, Florida, a place where people often move to escape the fast-paced rhythm of the city, 9-year-old Jessica Marie Lunsford lived a life surrounded by profound love. Affectionately known to her family as Jessie, she was a remarkably sweet, obedient, and somewhat shy little girl. To those who knew her best, she was the ultimate daddy's girl, sharing an unbreakable bond with her single father, Mark Lunsford. They were inseparable, with Jessie often accompanying him to work, riding along on his motorcycle, and singing her favorite songs. To give her the best life possible, Mark and Jessie had moved into a quiet trailer park to live in a multi-generational home with her grandparents, Archie and Ruth. Despite her cheerful demeanor in the warm Florida environment, Jessie was a timid child who suffered from a deep, paralyzing fear of the dark, requiring multiple nightlights just to fall asleep. On the evening of February 23, 2005, the family's peaceful existence was entirely normal. Jessie attended her usual Wednesday church youth group, came home and played happily with her father before he left for a date. Her grandmother, Ruth, tucked her into bed around 10 p.m., laying out her clothes for the following day. But that quiet normalcy shattered into an unimaginable nightmare in the early hours of the morning. When Mark returned home around dawn to get ready for work, he was greeted by the relentless blaring of his daughter's alarm clock. Assuming she was just in a deep sleep, he walked into her bedroom to wake her. Instead, he found an empty bed. Panic quickly set in as Mark desperately searched every room of the trailer and then sprinted outside screaming her name into the cool morning air, his confusion turning into sheer terror. The scene inside the house was chillingly undisturbed. There were absolutely no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, and no indications of a violent struggle. Jessie's school clothes for the next day were still neatly laid out at the foot of her bed, completely untouched. However, Mark soon realized a horrifying detail. The front door of the trailer had been left unlocked the night before. An unknown presence had slipped in and out like a ghost in the night. The only item missing from the entire house was Jessie's prized possession, a large purple stuffed dolphin that Mark had recently won for her at the local state fair, which she had been carrying everywhere for comfort. The family knew instantly that their little girl, terrified of the dark and incredibly attached to her father, would never wander out into the black of night on her own accord. The realization that someone had taken her prompted a frantic, heart-stopping call to the authorities. The sheer desperation of that moment was captured forever in the chilling 911 recording.
Emergency? Yes, we got a child missing. How old's the child? 9. She's 9 years old? Yeah.
Operator, 911 emergency. What is your emergency? Grandmother Ruth. Yes, we have a missing child. Operator, how old is the child? Did she run away? Grandmother Ruth. She's 9 years old. No, she would never run away. She's gone. She's not here. I need help.
Can you tell me your name? Jessie. Okay, how old are you?
When a child vanishes without a trace from the supposed safety of their own home, Law enforcement protocols dictate a rigid and often unforgiving starting point. According to the FBI's standard operating procedures, investigators must always focus first on ground zero, the immediate family members and those with direct physical access to the victim. Tragically, in the desperate search for 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford, this standard investigative protocol morphed into a grueling psychological ordeal for her already devastated family. Almost immediately, the investigative lens aggressively narrowed on Jessica's father, Mark Lunsford, and her grandfather, Archie. While Mark's timeline was eventually verified, the police relentlessly zeroed in on Archie, who had been asleep in the trailer that night. The foundation of their suspicion was shockingly superficial and completely disregarded the complex, unpredictable nature of human trauma. Detectives explicitly targeted the elderly grandfather simply because he did not weep, scream, or physically collapse during his intense interrogations. Because Archie internalized his agonizing fear and processed his waking nightmare with a stoic, quiet demeanor, rather than displaying visible tears, the police hastily labeled him a cold-hearted suspect, refusing to accept that grief does not always look the same. Determined to break what they believed was a wall of deception, law enforcement resorted to unimaginably cruel psychological tactics. In a deeply disturbing maneuver, investigators blatantly lied to Mark. They falsely informed the terrified father that forensic teams had discovered Jessica's blood on Archie's underwear. Their calculated goal was to completely shatter the family's trust, manipulating the vulnerable father into turning against his own dad. They forced Mark into a sterile interrogation room, effectively ordering him to act as an agent of the state and personally interrogate the man who had raised him. The resulting encounter was a heartbreaking display of a grieving family being torn apart by the very people meant to help them. Inside the cold room, the emotional toll was palpable.
They want me to ask you if you know where Jessie is. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you promised me. No, just forgive me. Then I have to ask you.
The consequences of this misdirected focus were absolutely catastrophic. While detectives spent their time administering polygraph tests, manufacturing cruel lies, and psychologically torturing an innocent father and grandfather, the real monster was slipping through their fingers. 3 precious, irreplaceable golden days of the investigation were completely wasted on a baseless witch hunt within the family's home. In child abduction cases, the first 72 hours are universally recognized as the most critical window for bringing a victim home alive. Instead of utilizing that vital time to actively hunt down the actual predator lurking just across the street, authorities squandered at a fatal misdirection that not only compounded the family's unjust suffering, but ultimately cost Jessica her life. After 3 grueling days of intense interrogations that yielded nothing but the shattered nerves of an innocent family, authorities finally conceded that Mark and Archie Lunsford had no involvement in Jessica's disappearance. With the family officially cleared, investigators drastically shifted their focus outward, realizing they were likely dealing with a stranger abduction. The investigation gained fresh momentum when detectives re-examined the crime scene and discovered a crucial, previously overlooked detail: an L-shaped cut in a window screen on the porch of the Lunsford home. This precise burglar's cut definitively confirmed the terrifying theory that an intruder had deliberately sliced the mesh to reach in and unlock the door. Armed with the certainty of a break-in, launching a massive sweep to interview every predator living within a 3-mile radius of the Lunsford residence. Out of dozens of names, one specific individual began to stand out with chilling prominence: 46-year-old John Evander Cooey. Cooey was a transient with a disturbing criminal history, specifically including a prior conviction for molesting a child. Even more alarming, when authorities went to check his registered address, they found it abandoned. Through neighborhood canvassing, a detective discovered a horrifying truth. Cooey had actually been living off the radar with his sister in a dilapidated trailer mere steps away from the Lunsford home, a terrifyingly close distance of roughly 150 yards. The realization that a convicted child predator had been secretly living right across the street sent shockwaves through the investigative team. When police descended upon the sister's trailer, they found that Cooey had abruptly fled the area just days after Jessica vanished. This sudden, unannounced departure strongly suggested guilt. The FBI and local authorities immediately launched a frantic multi-state manhunt, releasing Cooey's mugshot to national news outlets and declaring him a primary person of interest. The intense media coverage proved vital. A few weeks into the investigation, a sharp-eyed civilian spotted a man matching Cooey's description wandering near a bus station in Augusta, Georgia, nearly 400 miles away from Homosassa. The tip led to his immediate detention by local police. Florida investigators immediately rushed to Georgia to conduct a face-to-face interrogation with the elusive suspect. Initially, Cooey maintained a cool, nonchalant demeanor, adamantly denying any knowledge of the little girl or her disappearance. Determined to break his facade, investigators requested that he take a polygraph examination. Cooey, perhaps overconfident in his ability to deceive, agreed. The test was administered by seasoned FBI Special Agent Terry Wetmore. For 2 intense hours, Wetmore analyzed Cooey's physiological responses to pointed questions about the night of February 23rd. The results were damning. The turning point of the entire manhunt occurred in the moments following the test. Agent Wetmore later recounted the chilling climax of the interrogation. Special Agent Wetmore, after it was done, I told Mr. Cooey he had failed the test, and that I knew that he had taken Jessica. John Cooey, his composure finally breaking, slumping in defeat. All right, I did it. I took her. Following his confession, John Cooey unraveled a sequence of events so horrifying it defied human comprehension. Under the cover of darkness, fueled by illicit substances, he slipped through the Lunsford family's unlocked door. Startling 9-year-old Jessica awake, he quickly silenced her, forcing the terrified child out of her home and across the street to his squalid trailer to avoid detection. Chillingly, forensic evidence later revealed the true sickening depth of his premeditation. A microscopic speck of dirt found on Jessica's pillow was traced back to the soil outside Cooey's trailer. This seemingly insignificant detail proved that the monster had methodically dug a grave in his backyard before he ever stepped foot inside the little girl's bedroom. For the next 3 days, Jessica endured an unimaginable hell. Cooey locked the little girl inside a cramped, pitch-black closet in his bedroom, subjecting her to repeated torment and starvation. During her agonizing captivity, a devastating twist of fate unfolded, one that would forever haunt the community and law enforcement. Police officers actively canvassing the neighborhood and looking for Cooey regarding his registry violation actually entered the trailer on 2 separate occasions while Jessica was trapped inside. Tragically, performing only a cursory visual check of the rooms, they never opened the closet door. Jessica was left to suffer in the dark, mere inches away from the rescue she so desperately needed. As the massive search operation intensified and police presence swarmed the trailer park, Cooey began to panic. Realizing the net was closing in, he made a sickening decision to dispose of his captive. Playing on the little girl's deepest hopes, he cruelly promised Jessica that he was finally going to take her home to her beloved father. Under this false pretense, he tricked the innocent child into climbing inside 2 heavy black trash bags. Once she was trapped, he tied the bags shut, hoisted her over his shoulder, and carried her out to the shallow 4-foot grave he had prepared days earlier. He callously threw her into the hole and began shoveling dirt over her. When the terrified child began to thrash and struggle against the suffocating weight, the ruthless predator stood on top of the bags, using his own body weight to crush her desperate fight for life, until she stopped moving. Guided by Cooey's confession, 2.5 weeks later, investigators finally unearthed the grave just 150 yards from where Jessica had vanished. The discovery of her remains painted a picture of utter heartbreak and unfathomable terror. Inside the suffocating darkness of the bags, the little girl had fought until her very last breath. Her body was found in a kneeling position, with 2 small fingers having managed to pierce through the thick plastic in a futile attempt to escape. Her hands were bound in front of her, clasped together as if in a silent, final prayer. And there, pressed tightly against her chest in her last moments of life, she was still clutching the purple stuffed dolphin her father had won for her, a devastating symbol of innocence, stolen by unparalleled evil. The trial of John Evander Cooey was a harrowing descent into the nightmare that claimed 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford. Although his defense team attempted to save him from the executioner, the prosecution presented an insurmountable mountain of irrefutable forensic evidence. The most damning piece was a bloodstain discovered on the mattress inside Cooey's squalid bedroom. DNA testing conclusively matched the blood to the missing 9-year-old victim. When combined with his desperate flight across state lines to avoid capture, and his own chilling, detailed confession, the physical evidence formed a steel trap that sealed the predator's fate beyond a reasonable doubt. The emotional crescendo of the trial arrived during the prosecution's closing arguments, delivering a shockwave of grief that reverberated throughout the courtroom, seeking to make the jury truly comprehend the sheer horror and depravity of the crime. The lead prosecutor orchestrated a visceral, heartbreaking demonstration, holding a purple stuffed dolphin, a replica of the very toy Jessica had desperately clung to in the dark. he meticulously placed it inside a heavy black trash bag. As he tied the plastic shut in front of the horrified gallery, he described the agonizing minutes of the little girl being buried alive, struggling for air as dirt rained down upon her. The powerful reenactment left the courtroom in stunned silence, bringing several jurors to tears as the unimaginable reality of Jessica's suffocation settled over them. Yet the most powerful and devastating moment belonged to Mark Lunsford. Stepping onto the witness stand, the grieving father directed his piercing gaze straight at the monster who had stolen his world. Channeling the collective outrage and heartbreak of a shattered community, Mark delivered a searing, unforgettable statement that felt like a solemn curse upon the killer. He told Cooey that he hoped the agonizing tears and cries of his daughter would haunt his every waking moment and rob him of sleep for the rest of his miserable life. In his final, resolute plea to the judge, Mark demanded the ultimate punishment, quoting a poignant phrase to underscore the severity of the unspeakable act. "It's just too heavy, Your Honor. It's too heavy for mercy." Cooey was swiftly convicted on all 4 horrific charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, burglary, and aggravated, and was subsequently sentenced to death. However, the predator would never make it to the execution chamber. In September 2009, just 2 years after his conviction, the child killer succumbed to a painful battle with cancer, dying unceremoniously inside his prison cell. For Mark Lunsford, who had endured the ultimate loss, this slow, agonizing end behind bars was not an evasion of justice. Instead, he saw it as the universe balancing the scales of fitting miserable demise that the grieving father simply described as absolute karma. In the devastating aftermath of his daughter's brutal murder, Mark Lunsford found himself staring into a seemingly bottomless abyss of grief. However, rather than allowing the crushing weight of despair to consume him, the heartbroken father made a profound decision to channel his unbearable pain into a relentless crusade for justice. Recognizing that the systemic legal failures which allowed a monster like John Cooey to slip through the cracks could easily claim another innocent life, Mark sacrificed everything to ensure no other family would have to endure his waking nightmare. He abruptly quit his steady job, walking away from his normal life to dedicate his entire existence to becoming a full-time child safety activist. Embracing his passion for motorcycles, Mark took to the open highways to spread his urgent message. Clad in a leather biker jacket vividly embroidered with the smiling face of his beloved 9-year-old daughter across the back, he traveled the country tirelessly. With Jessie symbolically riding alongside him, Mark transformed from a grieving single father into a fierce, unwavering guardian for children everywhere, lobbying lawmakers and rallying communities with raw, unfiltered emotion. His passionate advocacy quickly caught the attention of politicians and the public alike, culminating in the historic creation of the Jessica Lunsford Act, commonly known as Jessica's Law. Initially drafted and passed with overwhelming support in the state of Florida, this landmark piece of legislation was specifically designed to aggressively tighten the legal leash on convicted child predators. Mark had been infuriated to learn that Cooey, a repeat offender, had been living unchecked right across the street from his family. To prevent this dangerous oversight from ever happening again, Jessica's Law mandated incredibly strict monitoring protocols. It required convicted offenders who prey on children to wear electronic GPS tracking devices for life, ensuring law enforcement always knew their exact whereabouts. Furthermore, the legislation drastically increased mandatory minimum prison sentences for child predators, stripping lenient judges of the ability to let dangerous offenders back on the streets prematurely, and enforced rigorous community alert systems to keep neighborhoods informed. One of the most critical and impactful provisions of Jessica's Law addressed a terrifying revelation uncovered during the investigation. John Cooey had previously been employed by a contractor that did part-time work at the very elementary school Jessica attended. The horrifying realization that a convicted child molester had been granted physical proximity to hundreds of vulnerable students sent shockwaves through the educational system. Consequently, the new law implemented uncompromising, stringent background checks. It mandated that any individual, whether a direct employee, a vendor, or an outside contractor who sought work on school grounds, must undergo a rigorous screening and fingerprinting process. This crucial barrier ensured that predators could no longer hide behind third-party employment to gain access to school campuses. The ripple effect of Mark Lunsford's grueling, passionate crusade extended far beyond the borders of Florida. Driven by a father's undying love and an absolute refusal to back down in the face of bureaucratic resistance, Mark traveled from state to state, standing before legislatures to plead his case. His tireless, unwavering fight resonated deeply across the nation, sparking a massive legislative movement. Today, driven by the memory of a little girl who loved the color purple and her stuffed animals, an astounding 46 states across the United States have adopted their own versions or similar rigorous provisions of Jessica's law. Through his extraordinary resilience, Mark successfully transformed his ultimate tragedy into a monumental legal shield, cementing a legacy that continues to protect millions of children. As the calendar turned to February 2025, marking the solemn 20-year anniversary of Jessica Lunsford's tragic death, a profound shift occurred in how her story was told. For 2 decades, the narrative had been intrinsically linked to the gruesome, heartbreaking details of a horrific crime that shook the nation to its core. However, on this significant milestone, the media, the community, and her family made a conscious decision to change the conversation. Instead of dwelling on the darkness of the monster who stole her away, the focus turned toward the brilliant, endearing legacy she left behind. For Mark Lunsford, who had spent the last 20 years fighting relentlessly in his daughter's name, this anniversary was not just a day of mourning, but a celebration of monumental change. The tragedy had birthed a powerful movement, proving that even in the face of unimaginable evil, profound good can emerge and flourish. Beyond the sweeping legislative victories of Jessica's law, her legacy materialized in highly tangible, deeply compassionate ways, most notably through the creation of Jesse's Place. Before this groundbreaking initiative, children who had survived unspeakable cruelty were subjected to a traumatizing, bureaucratic nightmare. They were often dragged from the intimidating clinical environment of police station interrogation rooms to cold hospital wards for physical examinations, and then shuttled off to separate facilities for psychological therapy. This fragmented process forced traumatized victims to recount their horrors repeatedly in uncomfortable settings. Jesse's Place revolutionized this agonizing ordeal by establishing a centralized one-stop children's advocacy center. Designed specifically as a comforting, child-friendly safe haven, the center consolidates law enforcement investigators, medical professionals, and specialized trauma therapists under one welcoming roof. Here, traumatized children can find solace, receive comprehensive care, and begin their fragile journey toward healing without being subjected to further systemic trauma. It stands as a living tribute to Jessica's gentle spirit, ensuring that the most vulnerable are treated with the utmost dignity and compassion. The profound impact of Jessica's life also echoes through the very halls of the institution sworn to protect the public. Inside the Citrus County Sheriff's Office, a beautiful and poignant memorial known as the Tree of Life proudly adorns the wall. Each leaf on this magnificent tree represents the collaborative efforts of various agencies and volunteers who rallied together during the darkest hours of the investigation. More importantly, the memorial serves as a permanent visual anchor for the law enforcement officers who walk past it every single day. It acts as a solemn daily reminder of exactly why they wear the badge, why strict child protection safeguards must be fiercely upheld, and what is truly at stake. The Tree of Life ensures that the innocents lost will never be forgotten, transforming a symbol of grief into a perpetual beacon of duty and vigilance. Although Jessica Lunsford's earthly life was brutally cut short at just 9 years old, her radiant spirit defied the grave. She has transcended her tragic fate to become a guardian angel for millions of children across the United States. Through the laws enacted and the safe havens built in her name, she continues to shield the innocent from the shadows. For Mark Lunsford, the agonizing journey from a desperate, grieving father to a nationwide hero has ultimately brought him to a place of quiet peace. He no longer carries the suffocating weight of anger. Instead, he carries the enduring warmth of his daughter's love. In moments of quiet reflection, Mark finds comfort in talking aloud to himself, knowing that the comforting voice echoing back in his heart is the spirit of his sweet Jessie forever present, forever guiding him, and walking beside him for the rest of his days.